You know, when we look back at the American West, we have these very specific, these really rigid archetypes just locked in our brains.
Right.
You've got the stoic lawman, the desperate outlaw, the rugged cowboy. It's almost like a cast of characters from a play.
It really is. But then every so often you get this one figure who just refuses to fit into any of those neat little boxes.
And this might be the best example of that.
It's a fascinating paradox. I mean, we are talking about a man who is arguably the most famous gunfighter in American history. Yet, if you actually look at his resume, he spent his formative years training to heal people, not, put them in the ground.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're talking about the one and only Doc Holliday. And today, we're doing a deep dive into the life and legend of the man born John Henry Holliday.
And we've got a massive stack of source material here. Biographies, historical records, some of the Wikipedia deep cuts. And the mission, really, is to figure out who was this guy, really?
And to separate the Hollywood myth from the historical reality.
Which is fantastic, by the way. I mean, Val Kilmer's performance. Incredible.
Iconic. But the reality is actually so much more complex.
It is. It isn't just a Western shoot-'em-up. It is a story about terminal illness. It's about what a diagnosis like tuberculosis does to a man's psychology. And maybe most of all, it is a story about a very specific, almost fatalistic kind of loyalty.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Because the image I have in my head, the one we all have, is the coughing, sweating, the skeletal figure spinning a tin cup.
Right.
But before he was the nerviest, speediest, deadliest man with the six gun, he was just John. So let's go back to the very beginning. Where does this story actually start?
It begins a long, long way from the OK Corral. John Henry Holliday was born on August 14th, 1851 in Griffin, Georgia. And this context is so important. He wasn't born into a life of crime or poverty or anything like that. He was, for lack of a better term, Southern gentry.
So he had money. He came from a well-off family.
He had means and status, yeah. His father, Henry Burroughs Holliday, was a major in the Confederate Army during the Civil War. Wow. He even served as the mayor of Valdosta, Georgia for a time. So John Henry grows up in this world of expectation. He was baptized at the First Presbyterian Church. This was very respectable, very upright household.
Which is just such a stark contrast to the smoky saloons we associate him with later.
It's a different world. Yeah. And his education really reflects that class status. He went to the Valdosta Institute where he received a classical education.
And what did that actually mean back in the 1860s?
Well, it didn't just mean reading and writing. We're talking about rhetoric, grammar, mathematics, history, and languages, principally Latin. But our sources say he also studied French and even ancient Greek.
Wait a minute. So when we see him speaking Latin in the movies, like in Tombstone, that's actually historically accurate.
It is entirely plausible, yes.
That's not just a screenwriter trying to make him sound smart.
Not at all. He was a highly educated intellectual, and he took that intellect to Philadelphia in 1870. At just 19 years old, he enrolled in the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery.
Which, I have to assume, was a pretty prestigious thing to do at the time.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't some back alley apprenticeship. This was rigorous medical training. He wrote a thesis, for crying out loud.
Oh, right.
The title was Diseases of the Teeth. He graduates in March of 1872 with a Doctor of Dental Surgery degree. But here's a detail that I just love. He was only 20 when he finished.
So he was a prodigy.
Essentially, yeah. The school actually had to hold on to his degree for 5 months until he turned 21.
Why?
Because he was legally too young to practice dentistry.
That's amazing.
So you have this brilliant young man, degree in hand, heading back to Georgia to start what should have been a very respectable, very lucrative life.
He's got it all mapped out. He's going to fix teeth, make good money, probably get married, live a long life.
Right.
But then the tragedy hits.
Yeah.
And this seems to be the pivot point where John Henry Holliday dies and Doc is born.
This is the tragedy that shaped everything. And to understand it, you have to look at his family history. His mother, Alice Jane, died of tuberculosis, or consumption, as they called it back then, in 1866. Doc was just 15 years old.
And they were close.
She was the center of his world. And it didn't stop there. His adopted brother also died of it. It was, in many ways, a family curse.
So it's always been there, kind of hanging over the family.
Always. And then, shortly after he starts his dental practice in Atlanta, he starts seeing the symptoms in himself.
Oh, no.
Correct. Shortly after beginning his career, the coughing starts. He gets diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis, and the prognosis was just grim. In 1873, doctors gave him only months to live.
Can you even imagine that? You're 22 years old, you've just finished years of grueling school, you're finally ready to launch your life, and someone in a lab coat tells you, actually, it's over.
It changes everything about a person's psychology, right? It just strips away any kind of long-term planning. It forces you to live in the immediate moment. The medical advice at the time was pretty standard for the era. Move to a drier, warmer climate. They thought the arid air in the American Southwest might slow the deterioration of his lungs.
So that's what sends him west.
He packs up and heads for Dallas, Texas.
Okay, now before we get him to Texas, I want to address a rumor that pops up a lot in the lore.
Mm-hmm.
There's this story that he didn't leave Georgia for his health, but because he killed some men at a swimming hole.
Right, the Withlacoochee River incident. This is a classic example of Western myth-making.
So what's the story?
The story goes, and this was largely popularized by Bat Masterson in a profile he wrote years later, that a 22-year-old Holliday went to his favorite swimming hole, found it occupied by some black soldiers, flew into a rage, and killed 2 of them with a shotgun.
That paints him as a violent killer right from the very start. But our sources say, what? Not true.
Almost certainly not true. Family members disputed it at the time, suggesting he might have fired over their heads to scare them off, but he certainly didn't kill anyone.
But what about official records?
That's the key. Historians like Gary Roberts and Alan Barra have combed the records. There is 0 contemporary evidence, no police reports, no indictments, no newspaper articles, nothing.
So it's a tall tale.
It's likely a fabrication or just a wild exaggeration meant to burnish his reputation as a bad man later on. The reality is much, much sadder. He left because he was dying.
Okay, so he lands in Dallas in 1873.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. He didn't just immediately become a gambler.
No.
He actually tried to make the dentist thing work in Texas.
He did. He wasn't ready to give up on his profession. He partnered with another dentist, a Dr. John A. Seagar in Dallas.
Were they any good?
They were great. This is the part people completely forget. They entered the Dallas County Fair, specifically the annual fair of the North Texas Agricultural, Mechanical, and Bloodstock Association.
That is a mouthful.
It is. But get this, they swept the awards.
I love this detail. What specifically did they win?
Okay, so they won Best Set of Teeth in Gold, Best in Vulcanized Rubber, and Best Set of Artificial Teeth and Dental Wear.
Best in vulcanized rubber. That is incredible. So he was an award-winning dentist. He was at the absolute top of his game.
He was. But there was a problem.
The cough.
The cough. Tuberculosis involves coughing. Violent, bloody, racking coughing spells. Now just imagine for a second, you're sitting in a dental chair, mouth wide open, completely vulnerable.
Oh boy.
And your dentist starts hacking up a lung right over your face.
Yeah, that's just bad for business. I would not go back to that dentist. Not a chance.
It was fatal for his practice. Patients stopped coming, his income completely dried up, and he realized he needed a new way to make a living, one that didn't require close contact or physical exertion. He was getting weaker.
But his mind was still sharp.
Sharper than ever. And he had a natural aptitude for math. It turned out he was very, very good at cards.
And this wasn't considered a scummy thing to do back then.
Right.
Being a gambler.
Not at all. In the Arizona and Texas of the 1870s, professional gambler was a legitimate, recognized profession. It was almost respectable in some circles. So necessity made him a gambler.
But the gambling life comes with its own hazards. You're in saloons, there's a lot of alcohol, there are sore losers.
It does. And the trouble starts pretty quick. In Dallas, 1874, he gets indicted for illegal gambling. Then in 1875, we see the first real flash of that famous temper.
A shootout.
He gets into a shootout with a saloon keeper named Charles Austin. They traded gunfire, but nobody was actually hit. He was found not guilty, but, the heat was on. He moves to Denison, Texas, gets fined again, and eventually decides it's time to head further west.
So he starts bouncing around a bit. Denver, Wyoming, Deadwood.
Mm-hmm.
He's dealing faro. He's getting into knife fights. The records show he leaves a guy named Bud Ryan seriously wounded in Denver. He beats another guy with a walking stick in Breckenridge, Texas. The violence is escalating really quickly.
It is. And it's worth noting the psychology here again. Just remember, he believes he is a dead man walking. He has absolutely no fear of death because death is already sitting on his shoulder.
Right.
And that makes him incredibly dangerous. If you pull a gun on a man who genuinely doesn't care if he dies, you have lost all your leverage.
That is a terrifying thought.
What?
And that brings us to Fort Griffin, Texas. This is where the main cast of characters really starts to assemble.
It is. First, he meets a woman, Mary Catherine Horney.
Big Nose Kate.
That's her.
I've always felt bad about that nickname. It's not very flattering.
No, but she was a formidable woman, regardless of the name. She was educated, she was tough, stubborn, and completely fearless. The sources say she worked as a prostitute, but she chose that life because she valued her independence above all else.
She didn't want to be tied down.
Exactly. She refused to be trapped in a domestic life. And she is the only woman Doc Holliday is known to have had a significant long-term relationship with.
And it was in Fort Griffin that he meets the other most important person in his life.
Wyatt Earp.
How did that happen?
The setting is the Beehive Saloon. Wyatt Earp is a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, and he's chasing an outlaw named Dirty Dave Rudabaugh. The saloon owner, a guy named John Shancy, points Earp toward Holliday, saying Doc had played cards with Rudabaugh and might know where he went.
So it starts out just as a police inquiry. Hey, have you seen this guy?
Exactly. It was purely transactional. But they hit it off. Holliday helped Earp with information, told him he thought Rudabaugh probably went back to Kansas, and this initial meeting, this simple conversation, sparked a friendship that would become legendary.
But the friendship wasn't really forged in fire until Dodge City. Right.
Yeah.
This is the moment where Doc proves his worth in a big way.
Yes. This is 1878. Doc and Kate are in Dodge City, and Doc is actually trying dentistry one last time.
No way.
Yeah, he even put an ad in the local paper offering money-back guarantees if the teeth didn't fit.
Wow.
But he spent most of his time dealing cards in the Long Branch Saloon.
And that's where trouble starts.
Big trouble. A group of Cowboys accounts vary on how many, maybe a couple dozen, led by a man named Ed Morrison or Tobe Driscoll, are tearing up the place. They're harassing customers, breaking glass, just causing chaos.
And Wyatt Earp rushes in to handle it.
He does, but he's completely outnumbered. Guns are drawn on him. It looks like this is the end of Wyatt Earp.
But Doc is there.
Doc is playing cards in the back room. He sees what's happening. He calmly stands up, draws his pistol, walks up behind the leader, Morrison, and puts the barrel right to his head. He forces the Cowboys to disarm, basically telling them, and I'm paraphrasing the sentiment here, to drop the guns or he'll blow Morrison's head clean off.
Talk about having a friend's back.
Wyatt Earp never, ever forgot it. He credited Doc with saving his life that day. And from that moment on, despite their very different personalities, the stoic, teetotaling lawman and the volatile, drinking gambler, they were bonded for life.
So naturally, when the Earps decide to head for the big silver boomtown of Tombstone, Arizona,
Doc follows. He arrives in September 1880, and almost immediately he gets embroiled in the local politics. And you have to understand, Tombstone was split right down the middle.
how so?
You had the Earps, who represented the business owners, the town interests, the Republicans, and then you had the Cowboys, the Clantons and McLaurys, who represented the rural outlaw element, the Democrats.
And Doc was a lightning rod for trouble. The Cowboys hated him.
They did. And there's this incident with the stagecoach robbery that I think really shows how badly the local enemies wanted him gone.
What happened?
The Kinnear and Company's stagecoach was robbed in March of 1881. The driver, a man named Bud Philpott, and a passenger were killed. The local sheriff, Johnny Behan, who was a bitter enemy of the Earps, saw an opportunity.
To frame Doc.
Exactly. He and another man named Milt Joyce got Big Nose Kate drunk. Very, very drunk.
Hefty business.
It is. They manipulated her, played on her fears, and got her to sign an affidavit saying Doc Holliday had been part of the robbery and the murders. They used his own partner against him.
How did Doc get out of that one? That sounds pretty damning.
Well, the Earps were able to provide concrete alibis for Doc. He was somewhere else when the robbery happened. And crucially, once Kate sobered up, she confessed that she'd been completely manipulated and didn't even know what she was signing. The charges were dismissed as ridiculous, but it just shows you the level of tension. They were actively trying to frame him to get at the Earps.
Which leads us inevitably to October 26th, 1881, the gunfight at the OK Corral. Now, we've all seen the movies, but what stands out to you in the source material about Doc's specific role that day? What do people usually get wrong?
Two things, really. First, his official status. We often think of him as just a vigilante friend tagging along for the fight.
Right, just a guy with a gun.
But that morning, Virgil Earp, who was the city marshal, officially deputized Doc Holliday. Doc was a sworn special officer of the law.
That is a crucial distinction. He wasn't just some guy. He was acting as the police.
Precisely. And second, the weapon switch. This is a small detail that really paints the scene. Virgil Earp had a short coach gun, a double-barreled shotgun from the Wells Fargo office.
A pretty intimidating weapon.
Very. And as they walked down Fremont Street, Virgil wanted to appear calm, not aggressive. He didn't want to alarm the townspeople by openly carrying this massive shotgun, so he gave it to Doc.
Why Doc?
Because Doc was known for wearing a long gray overcoat. He could hide the shotgun underneath it. In exchange, Virgil took Doc's walking stick.
So Doc is hiding a shotgun under his coat.
You have this image of Doc walking into the most famous gunfight in history with a shotgun concealed under his coat and a nickel-plated pistol in his pocket. He was ready.
So they get to the empty lot on Fremont Street, which wasn't actually in the OK Corral, right?
That's right. It was a narrow lot next to the corral.
Here.
They confront the Cowboys, Ike and Billy Clanton and Frank and Tom McLaury. The tension is just unbearable. The shooting starts almost instantly. And here is that classic line.
Go on.
Frank McLaury allegedly yells at Doc, "I've got you now."
And Doc says,
"Blaze away, you're a daisy if you have."
"You're a daisy if you have." I love that line. It's so dismissive. What does daisy even mean in that context?
In the slang of the time, a daisy was something excellent or highly admired, a top-notch thing.
So he was taunting him.
Oh, completely. He was basically saying, "You'll be a real champion if you can actually hit me." It was pure, unadulterated mockery in the face of death.
And in the chaos that follows, Doc uses that shotgun.
He does. He levels it at Tom McLaury and blasts him in the chest. That was a kill. The shotgun did its job. Doc himself gets grazed by a bullet from Frank McLaury. It hit his holster and burned his hip, but he keeps fighting.
So, despite the legend of him killing dozens and dozens of men, we know for a fact he killed Tom McLaury here.
Yes. That is one of the few completely confirmed kills in his entire life.
But the 30-second gunfight didn't end the trouble. It just started a war, didn't it?
It was the beginning of the end. The Cowboys retaliated. They ambushed Virgil, shooting him with a shotgun and maiming his arm for life. Then, a few months later, they assassinated Morgan Earp while he was playing billiards.
And the justice system failed them.
Completely. The justice system in Tombstone was broken. The Cowboys had too much influence and too many friends in high places. So Wyatt Earp decided to take the law into his own hands.
This is the Earp Vendetta Ride.
And Doc was right there with him. Wyatt was appointed Deputy U.S. Marshal, and he deputized Doc again, along with a few others. They went hunting.
And the first target was Frank Stillwell, the man they believed was one of Morgan's assassins.
They found him at the Tucson train station, lying in wait to finish off the wounded Virgil. Stillwell's body was found the next morning next to the tracks, riddled with buckshot. Warrants were immediately issued for the arrest of the Earp posse, including Doc.
So they were fugitives.
In the eyes of the local sheriff, yes, but in their own minds, they were federal marshals carrying out justice.
And there's a specific battle during this ride that really highlights Doc's loyalty. The fight at Iron Springs.
This is a crazy encounter. The posse just stumbles upon Curly Bill Brocious and his gang at a watering hole. It's a total ambush.
And Wyatt just goes for it.
Wyatt jumps off his horse and starts blasting. He kills Curly Bill almost immediately. But the other men, including Doc, come under incredibly heavy fire and are forced to pull back.
And so it gets pinned down, right?
Texas Jack Vermillion. His horse is shot out from under him and it falls on his leg. He's trapped in the open, a sitting duck.
What does your Doc do?
Doc Holliday, along with the others, had to retreat initially to get some cover, but he kept firing back, laying down covering fire to protect Vermillion until he could get free. It shows that even in a chaotic retreat, he was looking out for his team.
So they finish the vendetta, kill a few more cowboys, and then flee to New Mexico to escape the warrants.
Right.
And this is where the story takes a turn that I feel like gets left out of the hero narrative a lot. The breakup.
It's a sad and, frankly, an ugly moment. They're in Albuquerque eating at a restaurant called Fat Charlie's, and Doc, who we know had a mean streak, especially when he was drinking, makes a comment.
What happened?
Well, Wyatt was staying with a prominent local businessman named Henry N. Jaffa, who happened to be Jewish, and Doc, in his cups, makes an anti-Semitic slur. He calls Wyatt a damn Jew boy for associating with Jaffa.
Oof. That is hard to hear.
And you have to remember, Wyatt's romantic partner at the time, the woman who would become his common-law wife, Josephine Marcus, was also Jewish.
So Wyatt was
furious. He just got up from the table and left, walked out on him.
And that was it. The dynamic duo broken up over a drunken slur.
It wasn't a permanent estrangement. They did see each other later in Colorado, but it caused a very serious rift. And it shows Doc's flaws. He wasn't a saint. He had an ungovernable temper, as Bat Masterson later put it. He could be caustic, offensive, and prejudiced.
So Doc drifts to Colorado. But The law from Arizona is still after him for the Stillwell murder.
Oh, that's right.
And this leads to one of the cleverest legal tricks I've ever heard of. Enter Bat Masterson again.
This is absolutely brilliant. Doc gets arrested in Denver in May of 1882. Arizona sends an extradition request. They want him sent back to hang for murder. Wyatt hears about this and asks Bat Masterson, who was at that time the police chief in Trinidad, Colorado, to help.
So what does Bat do? Does he break him out of jail?
No, something much, much smarter. He fabricates a charge. He goes to a judge and claims Doc conned him out of money in a bunco game, a confidence scheme here in Colorado. He swears out a local warrant for Doc's arrest.
Wait, so he had him arrested to save him?
Exactly. So now the governor of Colorado, Frederick Pitkin, has two competing warrants on his desk.
Yeah.
One from Arizona for murder and one from his own state, Colorado, for bunco.
And the local one takes precedence.
Masterson argued that it did. The governor agreed and refused the extradition request from Arizona.
That is 4D chess right there. Sorry, Arizona, we can't send him to you to be hanged. We have to prosecute him for this fake crime we just made up.
And of course, once the extradition was denied, the local bunco charges were quietly dropped, or he was released on a small bond and just never showed up. Doc was a free man in Colorado.
But he wasn't free from his demons or his poverty. By 1884, he's in Leadville, and he's in really bad shape.
He was destitute, he'd pawned all his jewelry, he was sick, and he owed $5 to a man named Billy Allen.
$5. That's about $170 in today's money.
Right.
He's going to get into a gunfight over $5.
Well, Billy Allen was a bartender and also a special officer, which meant he could legally carry a gun. He threatened Doc, told him to pay up or else. By all accounts, he was hunting Doc down. On August 19th, Doc is in Hyman's saloon. He knows Allen is coming for him.
And Doc is just tiny at this point, isn't he? Wasted away.
The sources say he weighed 116 pounds. The TB was just consuming him. Billy Allen outweighed him by a good 50 pounds. When Allen walked through the saloon door, Doc didn't wait. He reached under the bar, grabbed his gun, and fired.
And he hits him.
The first shot actually hit the door frame. Allen stumbled. Doc fired again and hit Allen in the arm, severing an artery. Allen survived, but his arm was never the same.
So Doc goes to trial for this, and this is where the Western Credo comes into play.
The jury acquitted him. They cited the no duty to retreat law. The idea was that if you are threatened, you don't have to run away. You can stand your ground and defend yourself.
And they bought it.
They did. They saw a frail, dying man being threatened by a much larger man, and they let him walk.
But that was really his last stand, wasn't it?
It was. The high altitude of Leadville was terrible for his lungs. He was relying on alcohol and laudanum, which is an opiate, just to get through the day. In 1887, he moves to Glenwood Springs, hoping the famous hot springs there might help him.
But they didn't.
No. In fact, the sulfurous fumes from the springs probably made his lung condition even worse. He checked into the Hotel Glenwood. By November, he was completely bedridden. He was only 36 years old, but he looked like an old man.
And we have to talk about the death scene. It's so cinematic. But the sources say it's true.
It is, drawn from accounts of those who were present. On the morning of November 8th, 1887, he wakes up and asks the nurse for a shot of whiskey.
And she says no.
She refuses. And he's lying there, and he looks down at his feet.
Which are bare, no boots.
Right, he's in a bed. And his last words were, "This is funny."
This is funny. What do you think he meant by that?
The consensus has always been that he expected to die with his boots on.
In a gunfight.
In a gunfight, in the street, a violent and sudden end. That was the death he had been courting for 15 years, to instead die in a bed, looking at his bare feet, essentially just fading away. To him, the irony was the final joke.
Wow. That's incredible.
He died at 10 a.m. He was buried in Linwood Cemetery overlooking the town. There's some debate about the exact grave site because the ground might have been frozen, but he's up there.
So we have the life. Now let's talk about the final scorecard. Part 7, fact versus fiction. The legend, the reputation, says he killed more than a dozen men.
Yeah, that's the number you hear. But modern researchers have really dug into this, and the reality is much, much lower.
How low?
Confirmed kills. We have Mike Gordon in 1879, Tom McLaury at the OK Corral, and possibly Frank Stillwell during the Vendetta Ride.
That's it?
That's it. 1 to 3 men.
That is a massive difference from the reputation.
It is. But you have to look at his other stats. He was arrested 17 times. He survived 5 separate ambushes. There were 4 different attempts to lynch him.
So the violence around him was real, even if the kill count was exaggerated.
Exactly. He was in the thick of it constantly. But he often shot to wound or shot to scare, or frankly, his reputation did most of the work for him.
So let's look at how his peers saw him. Wyatt Earp, obviously he loved him.
Wyatt wrote a very famous tribute to him in 1896. He said, and I'm quoting here, "I found him a loyal friend, a dentist whom necessity had made a gambler, a gentleman whom disease had made a vagabond, the most skillful gambler and nerviest, speediest, deadliest man with a six-gun I ever knew."
High praise. But Bat Masterson, not so much.
No. Masterson really didn't like him. He called Dark a weakling who couldn't whip a 15-year-old boy in a fistfight. He claimed Doc had a mean disposition and killed because he physically couldn't fight any other way.
He needed the gun as an equalizer.
That was Masterson's take.
And Virgil Earp, Wyatt's brother.
Virgil's take is maybe the most balanced. He called him gentlemanly and a good dentist, but he also noted that outside of us boys, I don't think he had a friend in the territory. Doc was abrasive, he was difficult, but if he was your friend, he was your friend until the very end.
So what does this all mean for us? Why are we still talking about a dentist from Georgia who died in 1887?
I think Doc Holliday endures because he represents the ultimate tragic anti-hero. He isn't the clean white hat hero like the Lone Ranger.
No.
He's damaged, he's dying, he has absolutely nothing to lose. And in a world that was often lawless and brutal, there is something incredibly compelling about a man whose loyalty to his friends was the only law he really followed.
It's the loyalty that gets me every time. He went into the OK Corral, he went on the Vendetta Ride, not for money, not for a sense of civic duty, but because Wyatt needed him.
Precisely. And that brings us to the final provocative thought for you to take away.
Lay it on us.
Consider this. John Henry Holliday dedicated his entire early life to the science of healing. He studied for years to become a doctor of dental surgery. He wanted to fix people.
Right.
But history remembers him solely as a killer. And the only reason he became that killer was because he himself was dying.
If he hadn't caught TB.
If he hadn't contracted tuberculosis, he would have been Dr. Holliday, a respected, successful dentist in Atlanta. He would have lived a quiet life, raised a family, and died in total obscurity. We would never, ever know his name.
So the disease that killed him
is also the only reason he's immortal.
That is a heavy thought. The curse was also the legacy.
It really was.
Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you learned something new about the man behind the mustache.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.